everyone, it's Religious Fanboy here again, and today we are discussing the Christian lessons and themes that are paralleled in episode 8 of the anime Daddies. The lesson for this video is, it is not until we embrace our purpose of being God's workmanship, as well as God's plan for us, that we are able to experience the joy and peace of mind that can withstand all circumstances that God has promised us. This is our fourth sermon in our 5-sermon Christmas series. And our Bible verse for today is Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10, which says, "We are the workmanship created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them." And the illustration from the episode is something that we will see fulfilled later on in the series. But in the episode, the illustration is Ray being unable to stand up to his father due to not knowing his purpose and the meaning of the life that he has built for himself. And this is contrasted with the person he was targeted to kill in this episode, who had left the mafia life behind him because he had met a woman that he loved and had gotten married and wanted to start a family, and thus was able to put the mafia life behind him. And we also see this illustrated earlier on in the episode with the conversation that Ray has with his father. And we see the parallel outcome, this conversation paralleled with a positive outcome in the final episode of the anime Daddies. And with that, I'm going to transition to our 3 talking points. Our first talking point is that the desire to be able to justify our existence with our own actions and success robs us of joy. We see this with Ray, where in his conversation with his father, where we already know from earlier episodes in the show how shy and submissive Ray can be. But because of his upbringing, he's unable to give indication of worldly success in order to attempt to justify to his dad him choosing a life outside of working for the crime family and choosing to help raise Miri. And we can also fall into this trap in our own life. Specifically in my life, I have deeply struggled with job search. And this has led to me falling into the temptation of comparison, which common phrase is that comparison is the robber of joy. And this rings true in life, or with my job search. It is very easy for me to feel like I have to be impressive all the time. And something that we all face are those difficult conversations when catching up. Is what have you been up to? Because our human nature, we feel compelled to compare ourselves to that person. And as young adults, this can be especially hard for us when we don't have a stable job or income, and aren't married and don't have kids, and we see those who are around us, both people close to our age, as well as friends that we knew from college, and see their Facebook posts of them having good jobs, being married, and in some cases even having their first child. And this can, along with the destructive idea of prosperity gospel, there is prosperity in gospel, where God will deliver us from things. But something that God does not promise us is worldly success and great wealth on the earth. And if that's God's plan for you, that is great. But if you take anything away from this talking point, because unlike in child development, where especially early on, there are certain physical milestones that people are supposed to reach at a certain point. These things, such as worldly success, at our stage in life as well as later stages in life, these aren't things that, even those milestones, if we aren't meeting those at the pace that the world tells us to, that does not mean that God no longer loves us, that we have lost God's favor, and it most definitely does not mean that God has abandoned us. No matter how many times and how many ways the enemy or even our own hearts would try to convince us of the lie that God has abandoned us. But with any lie that creeps into our head, we need to be able to call upon that truth that counteracts and proves the lie false. And that transitions me to my second talking point, which is the only justification for our existence that we need is that we are made by God. When you look at great and famous art pieces, such as Starry Night or Mona Lisa, you don't think those are great because they gave food to the poor or cause positive change and influence that helped the poor or the needy or gave houses to homeless people. They are celebrated because we are able to visually see the skill, time, and care that was put into them by the people who made them. We can see this throughout all of God's creation in nature, but we can especially see it should be able to see it within ourselves. Because in Genesis, we are told when they were discussing the creation of humanity, they said, "Let us make man in our own image." This is God. The three Christians interpret this as the three parts of the Trinity, the completion of God, choosing among all the things that God could have possibly created. It is humans that God made in his own image and desired and made it possible for God to have a relationship with. We are God's Mona Lisa. We are God's Starry Night. And this is something that we need to remember, as well as be able to remind each other of whenever we face difficult seasons of life. Because in difficult seasons of life, there is time where it is needed to grieve many things, such as the loss of a loved one, or the loss of a job, or a health crisis. But it is especially in those moments where the enemy will put those lies in our heads again, that we are worthless because we are incapable of doing stuff that we are told by the world are things that we're supposed to be able to do. But God does care about those things, but God cares much more about us having a relationship with God, and as well as the love that is shown to us, because not only of the relationship God desires to have with us, but that God took the time to create his self-portraits. And if you ask any artist, that is one of the hardest things to do. And that because God is perfect and loves his creation, he chose not only to have the same relationship he has with the rest of his creation, but he specifically wanted to have a close and familiar and friendly relationship with us. And the third and final talking point is that we do not need to create our own work, because God has prepared work for us in advance. Excuse me. When it is very easy to fall into situations where we have to create work for ourselves, especially when we feel a strong desire to be productive. But like a good manager or job supervisor, or like the blueprint to making a house, we are given guides and when using discernment, we are able to see the work that God has prepared for us. And when we are able to do that, we no longer need to worry about what we need to do to stay busy. And we don't need to be concerned about how much to put on our plate or what to put on our plate or take off our plate of things to do. Because God has already prepared the do list for us and has challenged us to grow in the ways we need to grow and equipped us with the abilities that we need to be equipped with in order to do what God has called us to do. And we see this in the Christmas story where Peter and Mary were both scared initially to hear about the news of the birth of Jesus. And Peter was not sure what to do, even thought of quietly divorcing Mary in order for there to be no worry and concern and judgment on behalf of their people and culture towards Mary, so they would not think that she had an affair. But it was an angel who appeared to Peter and reassured him of God's plan and the birth of Jesus and the role that he would be in it. And it is because of this conversation and this reminder that he decided to stay married to Mary. And we also see how God would use Egypt in this story when they were in danger of Herod by allowing Egypt to exist. God provided for a place where Jesus and Mary and Joseph could spend the first couple of years of their life in safety of Herod, the king of Israel, who you would think have the strongest desire to protect and preserve the coming Messiah's life. And we also see this in the Bible in other stories where, because of the encouragement and the instruction by God, Gideon and 300 people were able, with God's help, to overcome 3,000 or thousands of enemy forces. And like these things, like these past examples, we can look at them and be reassured of God's promises and be able to face whatever difficulties and seasons of life that God has called us to, and trust that God is preserving us and has and is continuing to give all that we need in order to overcome and withstand the hardships that we face in this life. And with that being said, Merry Christmas, may God be with you, and see you next time. Bye.